sharing your thoughts with us. In this second part, as I said, we're going to hear two new works that were created from the same poem. This was, I think, Libby's idea back several months ago, and we began to talk about this. And so what Carol and Libby have set is actually a short poem of mine. When we asked, what would you like to take a look at? You know, what would be the criteria for what you're looking for? And Libby said, short. So that's what she got. I'm going to read the poem first, and then we'll hear it performed. Blessing. Sorrow will come. May there also be kindness and grace, easy silence in the place beyond words, and words to warm the silences. A channel that guards the passage of your small and battered boat, then opens again, wide. I'm actually going to read it a second time, and let you know a couple of things about the poem, because this is something I'm sure a composer must consider, and that is, what is the shape of the poem? Well, this is a poem that's obviously very short. It has no punctuation. It's written as just a few words on a line, then a space, then another line, and a space. So it's a poem that's compact in a way, but has a lot of air inside of it. I wrote it as a very spacious poem. And I would also add that though this doesn't have a particular rhythmic or metered quality or rhyme, that doesn't mean it's without form. Blessing. Oh, and one more thing. Whoever you are in the room, composer, poet, whatever your role is in the artistic realm, I just would like you to think about, as you listen, if I had written this, what kind of music, what might I hear? If I were a composer and handed this poem, what could I imagine doing with it? So you can listen with that in mind. Blessing. Sorrow will come. May there also be kindness and grace, easy silence in the place beyond words, and words to warm the silences. A channel that guards the passage of your small and battered boat, then opens again, wide. And now Clara Osowski, Marg Bilyeu will be performing the two versions. I don't know which one's first, doesn't matter. And I think you all know them as the co-founders and co-artistic directors of Source Song Festival. Thank you.
Kindness and grace. channel that guards the passage of your small and battered boat, then opens again. Of your small and battered boat, then opens again.
So much. I'm a mess. I have not heard these before. And we've got the room set up weirdly now. I think you're kind of maybe blocked. You might want to pull your chairs forward a little bit. You two. I actually want to ask those of you in the room for your reactions. Anything at all. What did you hear before we talk with the composers about their approach to the pieces? Can you just say something about what you noticed as you listened? Yes, anyone. And we'll have to use our outside voices because we're not going to pass the mic around.
Well, I just want to say that last note, my heart just opened up, like that.
She said on the last note, her heart just opened like that to hear it sung. The last note of the second version, the second piece. Yes. Anyone else? Yes.
Maybe this is inappropriate, but was what?
When does the big reveal come? Not at all?
We're not going to tell you.
All right. Okay, yes.
I will say that while the two compositions are so vastly different, and they have each composer's thumbprints on them, I think is spectacular, they both captured the space in between the lines of the poem, and I think that was just so effective. The end.
Who else? Other thoughts? Yes.
I'm wondering, like, both of the pieces had like not a similar accompaniment, but they were both not cluttered and busy, you know, they were just very beautifully simple. And I'm wondering, like, what specifically in the poem, like for each of you kind of lent to that, rather than, you know, one person having a crazy accompaniment, the other one didn't. Just wonder if there was something specific.
We'll ask them for that. That's a good question, thank you. And let's wait for their responses until we hear what other people observed or heard in listening. Yes?
I really loved how you could hear the levels of sorrow in both pieces, both very different aspects of a feeling.
Are you able to hear on the far side of the room? Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for speaking up. Who else has an observation to make? Yes?
Well, let's ask the composers if they think there'd be a different tone and a different sense if a tenor or a baritone had sung it.
Oh, all right. Hold that thought. Yes, Helen?
I kind of felt like the first one was going through the stages of grief, kind of singing that 3 times. It felt different each time, and it felt kind of more accepting as it went.
Very interesting. Yes?
I noticed, to me, it sounded as if these were 2 different types of meditation, of reflection. One using like a mantra where repetition is what really deepens the feeling, and the other, the opposite, where there's more space in between to kind of add that depth.
People who know music hear so much. Yes?
I agree with practically everything that's been said. The thing that I noticed between your reading and her singing and the writing is that they all had a continuity of line. And I loved it. I thought it was completely connected. From your reading to her singing and the composition. The compositions was quite lovely.
Anything else? Yes.
Speaking to the idea of line, like you're saying, I liked that both of them gave Clara these very long lyrical lines to sing throughout both pieces, and I thought that was an interesting connection.
I liked both treatments of the word wide, because they both approached it to demonstrate it in different ways, by either growth in volume or an increasing of pitch, but both maintain like a warmth and comfort in the wideness instead of just simply a shape.
You hear that comment about the word wide and its treatment. Thank you. Anything? Yes?
For me, as a listener, I felt like because the first setting repeated it 3 times, there was a feeling of almost like restlessness or someone else that's sorting through grief. And I kind of have the idea of maybe like keening, repeating something over and over again. I don't know if that was intended, but that was the effect it had on me listening to it. And then the second piece, because it was only set once, and the piano part was just creating such a sparse atmosphere. It felt like the person, the interpretation of the poem was a little bit more a person at peace.
Wow. Yes?
The second one to me felt almost like a prayer.
The second one felt like a prayer.
Yeah.
Yes, Tamara?
With the battered boat imagery, on the first one I felt that the boat was on a body. This is just me because I do images and stuff. But like there was, the water was always churning and you were always kind of going over. And on the second one, it felt like you were on a glass lake and you were stuck in that kind of desperation of your grief. Yeah, that's where I got that.
At least the boat was not on sand. Any other immediate reactions? Yes?
I thought the second one was calming, and I didn't feel it was stuck. It was finally at peace.
Gotcha.
So it's how we hear things so differently.
Let's ask our composers if you could talk about how you approach the poem. Either your methods or your thoughts or both, or whatever you'd like to say.
We have to reveal ourselves. I feel like we're on like a game show, like to tell the truth or what's my line.
Yeah. Shall we vote? No. You mentioned fingerprints. I mean, I don't know. No, go ahead.
I'll go, since. Oh, so, can you hear me?
Just barely.
I am the composer of the second song. And somebody would bring that, of course. So it's okay. But, yeah, I'm the composer of the second song, which means now you can say.
The first song.
And what would you like us to do?
Talk about, all right, you see this poem in front of you, and what's your process? How do you begin to think about it? How do you approach it?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I went into a meditative state, actually. I learned the poem, just learned the poem, and felt immediately this space that you talked about. That the poem has a shape on the page. It's almost boat-like, just where it's centered on the page and the way the lines are shaped. And there was a floating quality about the way, I don't know if you had any say in how the poem was positioned on the page. Did you?
I just sent you a copy of what I had. It was all left justified, and are you thinking of a different image of the text?
Maybe I made it up.
Maybe you did.
Maybe I did. Which happens, but Carol has a different.
Got it centered.
Oh, I see. Well, doesn't that look like a boat? Well done, whoever did that. Oh, that's great. This is an unpublished poem. I hadn't, finished doing whatever I was going to do to it, but now I know what to do.
But I thought about space, and I thought about floating, and I thought about what is easy silence. What is easy silence? Which when you have sound makers, a piano and a great pianist and a voice with the potential for sound, at least I thought, well, the potential for sound is enormous here. And I wonder if I can work with the opposite of that potential to create a feeling of not silent, like there's no sound, but just easy silence, so that we're not expecting, there's no tension, there's no release. I thought about that. And I also, and whoever said had come to peace with grief, that's where I put it, is that the process had been, I've been through that process many, many times. I thought if I come to the end of the process of grief, there is peace, but there's enormous sorrow that finally just surfaces and floats. For me, that's the way I experience it. So I thought about that, but then I was thinking it would be really cool if I could place the pitch of the last note, set it up in a way that actually opens the doors, pushes through the tonality that I set up. So that last pitch is a D natural, and it's not part of the language that I set up. And, so that's it. So those were the things. And then I got in a meditative state, and I just bent over the piano, and I went. And then I do what I always do, which is to lay across the piano bench, and then just write it. That's what I did. How would you?
I read the 12 poems that we were given, and I loved them all. But this was the one that immediately said, set me. And I knew what I wanted to do with it. I looked at it and I thought, this is short. And I think that if I only said it once, it's going to be over in 45 seconds. And I want to do a little bit more with it. So immediately I thought, I want to do it 3 times, and I want the accompaniment to be thicker at the beginning, less thick in the middle, and sparse at the end, which sort of morphed into stages of life at which you experience grief. And the voice here seemed to me to be someone who was speaking to the audience and telling them, yes, there is going to be grief, but there's also warm silence and words to fill the silence. And you're going to be battered, but then your heart opens again wide. And so you have grief, first verse in the perhaps beginning of your life, first third, second third, and then maybe just before you aren't here anymore. And so those are the three settings of it. So I set off the set, and as I was working on this, life was intruding, and I would work on it for a couple of days and then set it aside for a week and a half. And when I came back, I'd start all over again. So the three beginnings of the verse, of the text, are rhythmically the same, but contours are slightly different. And so that's basically how it got put together.
Very different. Yeah, very, very different.
Any thoughts or reactions from folks based on what you're hearing them say?
Right, but just chose three. Just how you pick the song. Why not four? Why not two?
God told me three. No, it just, somehow it just said three. It's one of those mysteries that, people ask you things and you say, I'm not quite sure.
So, yeah, question about why 3 times through in Carol's version. I'm struck too with how, and I'm fairly sure this happens to every artist, probably, and certainly in writing, it certainly has to be in performing, that people come up to you and say, oh, I loved how this worked, or what this told me, or what, and you think, that's great, because I didn't know that that's what it would do for you. I mean, that's the interactive nature of this work that's so fascinating to me, because when something beautiful is created, it can speak to other people's hearts, and that opens something up that, it doesn't matter whether it was intended or not intended, it's just fresh and new layers all the time. Yes?
Just a reflection about the way that you both described the process. It's interesting because they both had sort of trajectory to them. They had a process of grief, and where the first one sort of showed the whole trajectory, Libby's was still that final stage of sort of end of life understanding, and kind of it being by itself still implies that trajectory without showing the whole thing. And neither is, like you said, correct, but it's interesting that you can kind of approach that trajectory in multiple ways, either by showing the whole thing, or by showing the end point of a thing, or the middle point of a thing, or the beginning.
Yes?
This was the first time you heard?
Yes.
I was just wondering how you were feeling.
Oh, how did I feel on hearing these pieces? Well, this is a fairly new thing for me to have work set, so this is my third and fourth experience of hearing a poem of mine turned into song, and I always feel that it just lifts it off the page into some other realm. It's just absolutely, I think your word was heavenly, Michael, that it really is something that, it rises into another sphere. I love the experience, and I also think that what I've learned by listening to these other, all 4 of them, is, this made a difference to this composer. This is what he or she thought was important to emphasize. That's why it's repeated, that's why it's elongated, or wow, he or she made the most of this syllable, or the silence that was written in. So I always appreciate what people interpret, and it's just a marvel. Everybody should go try it, write something and have it set. It's just really quite a wonderful experience to hear it turned into another art form. And as Joyce was saying earlier, with full confidence, turn it over to the capable hands of someone whose art is very different from your own. Because it would be a shame to say, I need you to do it in the following ways. It would close those doors. Somebody, yes, David.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Marg. Since the word grief came up in a number of people's responses, I was wondering if you think of this as a poem about grief.
Well, darn it. Is it a poem about grief? I don't think it's very possible for me to disentangle grief and sorrow. I chose the word sorrow partly for the sound of the word and the and the word wide. It ends on the word wide. Yeah. In fact, I think when I gave you that poem, I'll get back to this question in a second. When I gave you the poem, I think I changed it. It had said, as I mentioned as a draft, opens wide again was how it first ended, and I thought, I'm not doing that for a song. No, I want it to open again wide. So yeah, I mean, I did pay attention to that. Grief. I don't remember if there was a particular impetus for this, but just aware of what people go through in life. That I have and everyone in this room has, loss of some kind. Sometimes it's not a grief as in a death that one is grieving, but some new situation that is really tough to get through, hence the battered boat. And the imagery that came to me very, very readily was wanting to be in a protected channel for a while, to have silence when you need it, to have people sitting with you just to warm the silence, even if there's no speech. I mean, we all know enough about it, probably, about grief and have accompanied friends and family through that to some degree. So all of those things were in my mind, grieving the loss of a person perhaps, but also perhaps of a way of life or something else. Very close enough? Yes, Margaret.
Yes, I wondered about the singer, if our lovely singer would tell us what the experience of the two poems were like for her.
Sure. I think when Mark and I were talking about which one to do first today, I think the instinct, it actually speaks to what you guys were composing, and what someone caught up on, that the Carol's piece, I was like, we did talk about it. Carol's piece is more communicative, like, I'm gonna come to you. And I think Libby's was more of a, you can come to me type of feeling. So I think that's why we chose to do it that way, just instinctually. There was an icebreaker first, I'll come to you, so that you feel comfortable enough to come to me. So that was, I think, noticeable from the way you said it. But other than that, I've sung their pieces before, so when I got it, I was like, yeah, okay.
On that question that
Yes.
you asked, like, I mean, were there things that you did differently to prepare for each of them?
Not really. They did inform each other. There was a couple spots where I was like, oh, I don't know if I should breathe. I was still deciding today. I was like, Mark, does this make sense if I take a breath before this conjunction? And I felt okay about some things because at times, Libby or Carol wrote a phrase that was long enough for me to not take a breath in, and I was like, yeah, but I still want to take a breath for intelligibility. So one phrase that they would write longer, and the other one would have a shorter phrase. It would kind of inform each other. So it's still, and then I can keep changing it and drive Mark crazy. So keep my toes. But yeah, they did kind of play into each other that way. You know, gave myself a little bit of permission to do either way.
Are there questions for either the composers or our performers? Yes.
This is more of a comment. I was deeply moved that this was performed by a couple. I mean, that really got me. And I'm not sure, you were both saying you write with specific performers in mind. I assume you knew who would, yeah. But that it's a solo, the poem in one voice. This was a couple speaking. That's what I heard. Just a, comment.
Well, yeah, the accompaniment and the voice, I think in both of ours, work very well together, right? I mean, I don't think that one would stand alone.
Is that what you're saying? Are you talking about actual real people? There are two people?
I maybe know what you're saying, because in consideration, Marg, when you create a poem, you're not thinking of two humans accessing it necessarily. I don't know, how do you conceive a poem with, I mean, do you conceive it for the masses? Do you conceive it for two people? Like, you know, an art song is traditionally piano, voice.
Certainly in its first writing, I was not thinking about music. And I would say my poems are very different from each other in that regard. Some of them are sort of a narrative or a storyline. In this case, though, it was more of a meditation on the subject of sorrow and wanting to write a poem of reassurance that a reader could take in and be reassured. I wanted to write a poem that would connect with a reader or listener. So that was very evident in this one compared to some of the other things I write.
I can kind of understand what you're saying, because, sorry, because reading poetry, I really enjoy reading poetry really for myself, but there's often times where you find that one poem where you have to tell the other person, you have to tell someone about it. And we're already telling each other about it when we perform it, so it's an instant.
I would chime in that the genre of art song, oftentimes, you know, the piano acts as either an impetus or a response to the text about to happen or that has just happened. And so I think in these two pieces it's a good contrast in that, as Carol said, hers, the piano starts thicker and then gradually gets thinner into something a little into a single note. And so that is very descriptive of the transitional phases of working through the sorrow. And in Libby's piece, it's a constant buoyancy of the speaker. And so I think that those are two different ideas in terms of our partnership as a pianist and singer presenting a single thing. I think that we're always talking about how the two inform each other. And I think these are a good contrast in that.
I would just add on a personal note that when I listened to the first few measures of Libby's piece, what I heard was not two voices, but a voice and, you know, rain on the window that was accompanying a solitary experience. So it just, you know, we all hear different things. Boy, this has been so interesting to hear and talk about it, and especially how many different things that folks in the room heard. We are going to wrap up. And in doing so, I want to, I'll just especially thank you all again for composing, Libby and Carol, and for performing this for us, Carol and Marg. She called me the wrong name.
Yeah, thanks, Marg.
That's fair, it's totally fair. I've had a long day. We did want to close with a couple of questions related to just this whole universe we occupy, many of us in the room, of art song. Thinking about, and the conversations from today of how poetry finds its way into music, what I've been thinking about is how many poets really know how this works. How many poets ever think about, well, I could write something, I could know a composer, I could get my work in front of somebody. I mean, does that happen? Are there ways that we should be promoting that get literary people more in tune with what the opportunities are here for creative partnerships? Any thoughts on that?
Song slam.
Song slam. Yeah. Song slam is a good idea. Yes.
Okay, sure.
Well, I took great inspiration from my undergraduate voice teacher, who is now exploring what she is calling the Chicana Art Song Project. And she's she's finding poets who want to speak about the Chicana culture from her own heritage. And she's finding composers who grew up in that same region and have that same Chicana identity. and she wants to create an anthology of works for this microculture that's very important. So I think it's, I mean, clearly I'm here. I obviously like art song. The jig is up. But I wonder if it's not more effective to kind of zone in on what your, like, look inwardly and see what where your interests lie, and then to seek out other people who have a connection. That way, when you're creating works, it's a symbiotic relationship. Because I think those poets in this Chicana Art Song project are gaining a voice from this platform that would otherwise not really exist, because them just promoting, you know, banging at doors and dinner parties and handing out their poetry, I don't think that would get very far. But I think, you know, when the art forms unite, I think they have a really great opportunity to reach an audience.
Is a marvelous example. I think that art song is certainly steeped in tradition and in history, but it's also, it can be very innovative and it's certainly an evolving art form. So trying to think about where there are perhaps perceived edges or boundaries of exclusion. We don't need to, you know, we can push through those in various ways. And I love this example that you've offered. Thank you.
Yes. Just to underline what you said, I want to reacquaint us with the AIDS Quilt Songbook. That was the brainchild of a baritone, Will Parker, who wanted to create a new repertoire around the subject of grief and just AIDS, just what it was, what it is, and the culture, and what it was so new at the time. And one of the things that I want to underline is that we now have an extraordinary repertoire of new song, you know, that 20 years later is now repertoire. That, you know, that every time we do come together just around an idea, it does seem, all of a sudden it seems to me like poets go like, da, you know, and composers go da, you know, and extraordinary, and I used the word profound this afternoon, and now I'm going to use it again and believe it. Profound things happen, you know, when we bring word and music together around the heart, the language of the heart.
Someone in the back had a question. Had your hand up. Yes.
I was going to suggest that any poets here talk to me.
Reception immediately following 5 p.m.
There are, you know,
have them all raise their hands.
Composers in the room right now.
Raise your hands if you're a composer.
Composers in the room.
Right?
All right.
I mean, we're all here.
All right. You know, I mean, thank you. Did you want to say more?
Just one other thing. Maybe Athena wanted to talk a little bit more about this herself, but she had an interesting idea the other day about setting up a service for poets who are interested in connecting with composers.
Ooh, let's hear.
Kind of creating a hub for poets who are interested in getting their work into a different sort of medium.
Yeah, that's me. So all the poets in the room, raise your hands. My idea is to offer. So I love poetry. I love art. I'm learning to love art song, and not everybody wants to set dead white guys, right? Not that we have anything against them. So I think composers are looking for text to set, and I think there are poets out there who don't realize what a heaven this is. And so my idea is to try and bring people together by offering a service that we do that. So if you're interested,
I love that idea. Again, reception follows. Find Athena. So this is exactly what I was thinking about in this panel and listening to others, podcasts and others that were talking about this. It seems to me that composers are always looking for text. They have libraries of text. They have, or poetry, I should say, that might become text for a song. And how many writers seek poets, are on the lookout. Writers seek composers. I've been using the word compoet quite a bit because I'm preparing to another new one. But why not? So if I'm as I'm a poet, if I hear somebody's work and think, oh, I love that music, why don't I go meet that composer? Say, I love your work, let's get acquainted. Maybe there's something we make beautiful music together. But so, yeah, I love that idea. The other thoughts, and I guess I would ask you also about Source Song, specifically Source Song Festival as an organization. Are there some things that we might do to further these conversations and get people acquainted with the potential of partnerships here? Any thoughts?
Year-round activities.
It's a great idea.
Sorry, Mark and Clara. Sorry, I'm really sorry.
When are you moving here, Sherry?
Tomorrow, probably.
You can sign up for the week that you will be sponsoring every event. Yeah. Other thoughts?
Publishing for general performance, things like what we've heard today.
Okay.
What would you like to hear about?
I would love to hear your piece and take it away and use it in my concert life.
So are you asking if these pieces will be published? Or
Yes.
are you asking about what happens when you try to publish a piece? Oh.
Well, and especially considering that this has just been presented today, and that would eventually possibly be published in how long does that take? When would that be available? See? Yeah. Go right ahead.
I am now my own publisher.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
As is Carol, you're your own publisher. Yeah, almost all of us have, because of the change in the way material is made available. I have, Carol has, how many composers in this room self-publish? Raise your hand.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so that we can, it's so that it's immediate.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, what we would ask in return is that at the concerts where you present our pieces, that those concerts are at least registered with our performing rights organization. So that we can collect the $1.01. Which we then split with the poet.
Pardon me, I'm sorry, what did she just, what was that last?
Would you split with the poet? Would you split with, you take
Oh,
that
gotcha,
$1.01 and split it with the poet?
I got it. Thank you.
It's a whole 50 and 100 cents.
That's exactly right.
It's gonna go towards rent.
Or an idea?
How many copies did you bring today?
0.
Yes, squat.
There's squat.
One copy, because this is the beta test. And so we go home and we say, okay, I heard this, and, like next week, it probably will be posted on the website.
Whereas in my case, I'll go home and stay up all night and change just one pedal mark.
We can make sure.
That's a good
Yeah.
Love to think about self-publishing.
I mean, I will say that good funeral songs are really like, how do you say that nicely? I mean, it's good to find a good funeral song.
It's true.
I think it's time for us to. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's been a long day. It's 5 o'clock. Our reception, I'm told, will be right out through these doors. We'd love to stay and mingle and chat with one another a little bit more. And I want to thank everybody in this room. We are all involved in this shared enterprise of making something of meaning and beauty and bringing it into the world. So we appreciate the work you do, and it is up to us to keep it going. So thank you so much for participating today, and another great thank you. And yes, and after the reception, grab a bite of dinner somewhere, come to the concert tonight, tickets available.